欢迎回来。6月下旬，美联储主席伯南克明确提出了年内缩减 QE， 明年年中结束 QE 的决定，全球市场随之一片哗然。先是美元走强，美股和黄金暴跌，第二天亚洲市场集体跳水，上证综指下跌2.77%。新兴市场股市、债市、货币的牛市是否就此终结了呢？中国市场又会出现什么样的投资机会？带着这些问题，我们的记者走访了摩根士丹利新兴市场股票业务主管夏尔马。鲁奇尔·夏尔马在摩根士丹利管理着25亿美元规模的基金。这名出生在印度的投资人一直都密切关注新兴市场的动向。从1997年开始，夏尔马每隔几个月都要飞往中国，了解中国经济、中国企业的第一手资料。在过去15年的时间里，他经历了包括中国在内新兴市场国家的起伏，并将自己的见闻结集成书，一炮走红的国家。该书获得《华尔街时报》和外交政策双双推荐。最近这本书的中文版本与读者见面。
I think during the last months, we can see the hot money is trying to leave China and going back to the States because of the recovery in the States. So, do you really worry about that?
Last month, it doesn't appear gradual. It appears as if something more violent is going on. But I think that the withdrawal will be more gradual in nature. I'm more concerned by the fact that in general, across all emerging markets, including in China, the growth is disappointing. So I don't think the hot money is the problem, which is that, yes, a lot of hot money did come when the growth rates were very high, and now as the growth rates are slipping, some of the money is going back. But to me, the fundamental issue is that the gap is closing in terms of the growth rate. We're seeing some partial convergence. But I think that the key issue for China really is that it needs to change the model. We need now to see more reforms take place and a new model to emerge.
When you talk about reform, what do you mean by reform? What kind of new model you would like to see?
Well, I think like a new model, what we'd like to see here, firstly, I think that the growth can't be financed by so much credit. In the last 5 years, it's taken more than $3 of debt to generate $1 of growth in China. 5 years ago, it used to take just $1 of debt. So one, this very heavy debt finance model, I think, has to come to an end. This pace of credit growth has to slow down. And secondly, I think that you need more reform now of the SOEs. These large state-owned enterprises are taking a lot of space and also possibly taking away some economic activity from the private sector. But in China today, what we see is that the sentiment in the private sector among the entrepreneurial class has turned a bit negative. I think what the government needs to do is to revive that sentiment once again, and for the public sector to play less of a role. Last 3-4 years after the stimulus, the public sector's role became much bigger. That needs to calm down.
How about the risk?
I think that as far as international investors are concerned, there are a couple of risks that they are concerned about. One is that when you invest in some of the state-owned enterprises, the international investors feel that the minority shareholders are not treated well. So I think that that is one big risk that they feel, that the objective of the shareholders here is not to sort of the SOEs, is not to improve profitability. And I think that is a major concern for international investors, that the focus of the large companies in China owned by the government is not so much on profitability, because the profitability of these companies has been declining for many years now.
How about their opportunities in their maybe capital market?
Well, I think that the international investors, I think that the international investors will get more interested in Chinese stocks once you have a feeling that this credit crisis risk has been put behind. Currently, what's really concerning international investors is this prospect of having a credit crisis in China. That the amount of expansion in new credit in China in the past 5 years has been huge. So what they're really looking to see now is that this credit growth slows down, because typically whenever you've seen such a massive expansion in credit, it's always led to some sort of a problem for the country. So that's the real big concern of international investors just now.
How likely do you think that will happen?
Well, I don't think so. I think that China should be able to avoid an outright crisis, because the government still controls a lot of the levers of the economy. It still controls a lot of the banks, and also the fact that the savings rates are very high in China. And very interestingly, although we spoke about hot money flows, China is not that dependent on foreign money to finance its debt. So those sort of conditions don't exist for a typical currency crisis to exist, which is what triggers a credit crisis. But I think in China's case, the big problem is going to be the growth, which is that because the system has so much bad debt now, especially after the stimulus of 2009, that banks and other financial institutions will be less willing to lend very aggressively going ahead. And so that's going to have a bit of a dampening effect on the growth impulse in China.
总的来说，夏尔马对中国经济的发展持谨慎乐观的态度。他认为，中国要防范的最大风险并不是热钱外流，而是国内的债务问题。但放眼世界，债务问题的解决和决策者的政治智慧高度关联。欧洲如此，美国亦如此。在中国，隐藏在金融体系背后的债务问题正在一步步地暴露出来，等待我们的会是什么样？只有时间知道答案。